Hey, welcome to another Human-Shaped Learning. I'm Scott.
And I'm Sharla.
And we are still here in my studio.
Yes,
Here.
I love it.
Yeah, I feel comfy, all surrounded by my instruments.
I'm sure you do.
It's comfortable. Don't look too close, though. Most of them came from pawn shops, but that's the way it goes.
They're wonderful, and they've created a lot of good music with you.
Thank you. That's really nice of you to say that.
Yeah.
I'm excited. It's really important, and this will be more of a kind of a self-care episode, but having that thing that you like to do on the side, that creative juices and all that stuff, creating things. So this is where that happens for me. So,
and this is your episode.
It is my episode, and I'm going to talk about something near and dear to my heart.
Aww.
Grandmothers.
Aww.
Grandmothers, yeah. I mean, there's nothing better than that. And this is actually what this is. This is a relationship episode. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about, we're kind of has several themes, but in the relationship theme, we like to talk about the importance of relationships, the value of relationships, just in everything. And we've got another one that talks about relational learning, which we're going to do, I think, next week. And this, there's a lot of overlap there, but relationships in every which way that you look at them are just so incredibly important to us.
And I would say, as you talked about grandmothers, that probably one of my most impactful relationships was with my grandmas.
I know, and I think about that now, and in so many different ways, because my grandmothers were incredibly important to me, including my great-grandmother. Mm-hmm. That I was fortunate enough to know my great-grandmother. But then also, as I watched my mom be a grandmother to my children, and now as I watch my wife, who is, she's not a grandma, she's a nana.
Okay.
She's a nana. And I'm a papa. So, which is kind of cool. So, Anyway, but what we're gonna do, we're gonna start out with a third thing. Last time we did a video, one that we've shot. This time we're going to do a video as well. I'm super excited about it. A dear woman, an elder here in our state. She's from Standing Rock, and her name is Gladys Hawk. And she did pass a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I feel so blessed whenever that happens. And that happens, of course, when you're interviewing elders, that you don't have them around for too much longer. But it makes me feel so thankful that we were able to sit down with her and hear some of her stories.
Yes. She was so vital to the development of our Ocheti Shakoin essential understandings in our state as just one area of her work. It's the area that we got to know her through.
Yeah. And she, of course, she herself was a grandmother, an unchi. Mm-hmm. And but then this particular interview that we're going to listen to is her talking about her own unchi. Her grandmother. And so we'll pull that up and we'll listen to that. And this is, I think we titled this one Grandmother Stories. So this is Gladys Hawk talking about grandmother stories.
In the evenings when we had our evening prayers, then, of course, the lamp light and all that, we didn't have electricity like this. Then they would sit at the table and smoke their pipe. My grandma had her own pipe, Grandpa had his, and they would have evening prayer first, and then they would socialize just by smoking, talk about things for the day, and then my grandmother would tell me, okay, now it's time for your bedtime, and I would sleep with her. So she would put me to bed, and then she'd start telling me stories that, your imagination can just run wild when you hear it in your language. It's just like watching TV, the cartoons, it just grabs your attention. Well, it's the same thing, but it was my mind. And because of the way that she would talk and her expressions, her tone of voice, or all of that, it makes the story come alive, so to speak. And so I would just be so mesmerized just listening to her talk about these stories that she told me. And usually, just at the end, you're just all tense and waiting for something bad to happen. Then she says, And so, and then translating it should say, and that's why I want you to be good. She said, don't be like this one in the story. I think, hopefully, that the history of how they were raised, they heard these stories, and on down the line, maybe not in the same words, the verbatim, the way that she told me. Maybe she heard it in a different way, but she's telling it to me at my level of learning. And so I think that stories are handed down through time just for that purpose. There is a purpose to everything, as you know, or, to me anyway, that's the way I understand it. We have to listen to what our elders have to say, because usually they're teaching us something. It's how you look at it, how you understand it, that you may not understand it right away, but all of a sudden, oh, yeah, that's what he meant, or that's what she meant. Those are things that are there. Stories are basically probably the foundation of good etiquette, of good behavior, and good standing of people, of how they're raised. I would put it like that, because stories are going to always be with us.
I love that. I love how she, you can hear in her voice how important her grandmother was, and what a warm, and she talks about the imagination that she, just listening to it in her grandmother's voice and in her language, just caused her imagination to just spring into life,
Those stories stick with you. I can think, just driving up here today, I was remembering my grandma talking to me about some things. I was just thinking about the world and how difficult some things are right now. And I remember her talking about, I had asked her one time, what happens when you lose everything as a farmer? When you had drought and you lost everything and it felt like the world was going to end.
Yeah.
Then what did you do?
Yeah.
And her response to me was, well, Sharla, we start over again. And it'll be okay, because we trust and have faith that it will.
Yeah.
And I think about that story in particular. For me, it's stuck with me my whole life. And it was just a simple conversation we had one evening sitting out on her step.
But you think about the strength you get from that.
Yeah.
When you know that someone in your direct lineage, someone you're related to, your relation, your grandmother, had that kind of tenacity that when things all fall apart, you start again, and you keep going, and you say, hey, that's what's in my blood.
Yes.
That's where I'm at. And I think about stories. I think about, like with both of my grandmothers, I think about the smells in the kitchen, the food that was cooking. I think about my grandma Simpson, Momo Simpson, always sang. I think about her singing. And this is about grandmothers, but it's also about grandfathers as well, And I just think about the what we get from people who play that role, our relationships with people who play those roles in our lives. And I recognize not everybody, it's you're fortunate when you get to have your grandparents in your life. Not everybody gets to have that, but I think everybody does need a grandparent of some sort. That sort of someone who plays that role.
That relationship. The elder, mentor, storyteller, lover on ya.
Yeah.
The person who just finds you precious in the world.
And if you're falling apart, you can go to them. And if they're not around, if you're falling apart, you recall them.
Yes.
You recall them in your life, and you think, that's a strength I've got, a relational strength.
I can remember as a kid thinking about my grandma's having my parents as kids and wondering what in the world was that like. They just seem so much older than me, even my parents, and then to think about their parents. I mean, I remember having some of those thoughts as a kid.
Well, and that's another thing that's kind of encouraging, because you can get a sense of your own parents from your grandparents.
Yes.
That you could never get on your own. And that's encouraging in a way, because sometimes parents have to play this role in your life where they're telling you what to do, and they're kind of, and you sometimes, not always, but you get a little, especially when you're young, you get a little resentment, they're always telling me what to do. And then your grandparents can help you understand, somebody had to tell my parents what to do, and then they got mature. And then they figured things out, and then they had me. Mm-hmm. And so that can kind of help when you're feeling like, am I always going to be a kid? Am I always going to be immature? Well, you can know, even my parents at some point, right. they had these same kind of struggles,
Right.
So I think the importance, and this is, like I said, this is our relationship episode. And so we're focusing on grandmothers and grandparents, but those are the roles that a lot of people can play in our lives, of that strength, and someone we can either go to if they're present, or tap into later when they're not present, and that really helps to shape us. And sliding on into our article for today, it helps shape our society. Mm. And that's not just me. That's the Smithsonian. Okay, I found this really awesome article. Okay, and it's actually a few years back. It's like 2012, but it's science, and so science. So anyway, I'm really excited about it. It's about grandma. We'll pull this up, and a really nice image here of grandmother's hands.
Yes.
And so new evidence that grandmothers were crucial for human evolution. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ideas in this article, because what started this research is these scientists who study human biology, but also study our relatives, our primate relatives. They said, in human society, women live for a very long time. Women lived longer than men usually. Mm-hmm. Okay. But there's a long stretch of that time when they are not fertile, when at menopause, and so the question being, and this was a woman who was leading this research. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Why do we see that in humans, but we don't see it like in chimpanzees or others? It's not the same. And so they proposed this idea, and they did some modeling, and they ran some figures to figure out what would happen if you have that situation. They created kind of this mathematical model where they had primates, and they had the women living, the females living for a very long time. And what they found is that exactly what the evidence, the archaeological evidence shows, is that grandmothers, first of all, what do you think they do? What do grandmas do?
In general?
In general, in the community, yeah.
Well, they carry wisdom. They are oftentimes close to retirement, so they might have, if they were working outside of the home, maybe time to support
right.
other things happening around.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And they all said, well, the good thing is, one, the young live longer, because quite often, in a setting out in the wild, even in our more recent history in the United States, if you're a mother alone and you're having children, and even there's a father there, okay, a lot of times when the new baby comes, the other children have to really fend for themselves and take care of themselves, and it gets very difficult. The grandmothers naturally played that role. So for one, it increased over time how many children families were able to have, because they had a grandma around. But more important, those things that you're talking about, the stories, the passing on of what's important, like Gladys talked about. she talked about etiquette. How do we behave well? How do we be good people? What does it mean to be a good person in our community? What does that look like? And all of those teachings then are some of the things that those grandmothers enabled to have happen over centuries, over time, as human society developed and progressed.
I actually have thought about this a little bit, just because my kids are getting close to that time in life where they maybe will be having kids in the future. When you're actually going through the process of raising kids and you're the mom or the dad, you are dealing with it on the spot, in the moment. You've never done it before. You're
Right.
doing the very best you can. Grandmas and grandpas have that long vision
Yeah.
of, they have gone through it, maybe not exactly what you're going through, but they have gone through those moments of, am I doing this right? How does this turn out if I continue in this trajectory? They have done that. And so they can offer a kind of wisdom you cannot get anywhere else.
Right.
And so I feel like that role, as a person who watched my mom become a grandma, and who was there for me, I think back and I think I wish I would have listened even more, because she had that long range wisdom and understanding of what a child needs and what you as the mom needs.
Right.
Or the parents.
Right.
Talking about both.
Right. And that's one of the things. I mean, we live in a society that doesn't have those roles just laid out as absolutely, here's what the mother does, here's what the father does. But even like with my daughter, who has just had her first child, she is able to, fortunately, she's a professional and she's working from home, and her husband actually is working from home too because of the COVID stuff. They've been working at home. So they both take care of little Fox. That's his name. But then there comes a time, Steve and her husband has to go to the office some. Megan has work to do. Their Nana, my wife, Cheryl, has Fridays off. And so Cheryl is then able to go spend time with Fox while Megan has that dedicated time then to catch up on some stuff for her work there in the house. And so there's this incredibly important role, whether you're looking at mothers, taking care of other children, or whether you're looking at mothers like today, taking care of professional things that grandmothers and grandfathers can help out with.
And the other side of that is, I think, I haven't talked to your wife specifically about it, but I'm sure it brings her joy to be able to be a part of
I would say
life
so.
that way.
I would say so. I know it brings both of us joy. I mean,
Right.
being able to do that. And also, and this, grandparents make jokes about this, but there's also a joy of being able to play a different role in a child's life, the child that you love, other than having them be your own child. You sometimes have, it's difficult. It's a different role being a parent than being a grandparent. And I think that's one of the things that they really were getting at in this article. So many of the things that we have that go beyond mere survival, just making sure we've got food on the table, just making sure we've got a roof over our head, just making sure that we, get the sleep that we need, we've got safety. Beyond that, all the things that in our society become the things that we do with our additional time, culture, art, storytelling, science pursuits, all of these things that make our society rich and take us into the, what we consider the beauty of human society. So many of those things, at least in their study, at least this is the theory, so many of them come by virtue of the fact that we have grandmothers around and I would say grandfathers too, but that we have that generation, that we're able to live multi-generationally. That enables us to pass on important things to be built upon in later generations.
You know, I'll speak from the other side of that. In my family, my mom's mom died when she was young. In fact, my mom was pregnant with my younger sister. She died when my mom was 33.
Yeah.
And so the loss of that role in our family, my mom became the matriarch of her family
Yeah.
when that happened.
Yeah.
And so at 33, you're just figuring out life. And to suddenly not have that person, I mean, she had many other women in her life that offered wisdom to her. And my grandpa did remarry, but it's different. It's different. And the loss of that role in our family has had long time impact.
Yeah.
In ways that I don't even know that we can fully understand, but we see. I see now, as a mom who's lived through that stage, if I wouldn't have had my mom during that time in life when my kids were young,
Right.
I don't know what I would have done.
Right.
And so not having that role, I can see the impact on that side too.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that we ought to acknowledge is obviously our society is structured a little differently now, but in traditional societies, almost across the board, the role of teacher quite often fell to parents or to grandparents or to aunts and uncles. They're teaching, carrying on the things, the traditions, the stories, all that teaching. And that's an inheritance that we have, I think, as educators. You know, I think, you know, we've got it's structured a little differently now in our contemporary society. And that's not to take anything away from grandparents. I think grandparents still do some of the most important teaching, and it's sad if you don't get that. But in other ways, we do get that from a really good teacher, or like you said, a really good mentor, someone in my community who has the time, the experience, the wisdom, the age to show me something new, to help guide me along in learning new things that are beyond just making sure I get to bed on time, I have my food that I need, I have the shelter, I have all those things. I know that I'm loved, I know that I've got my family, but those other things that make our society so rich once we know we've got what we have to stay alive, you know.
Right. And you know, part of grandmothers being able to do that is they're at a stage in their own lives where they don't have as much of that other stuff going on.
Right.
You know, if you're just maybe either on your own or with your spouse, it's very different. Cooking, cleaning, keeping up after everything, and in the household, if that's been your role. I can tell you that for me right now, you know, before having grandkids, now just having my husband and me, we have more time.
Yeah.
And so even just having the time to do those things is part of, I think, that, you know, that grandmothers are in a stage of life where they can devote their time and energy into those other things beyond survival.
Absolutely. So I think as, you know, wherever you're at as a parent, as a grandparent, that's something that you know, I like to think about. Obviously, I'm a brand new grandpa, brand new papa, and so I think about that all the time. What am I going to be passing along, both to Fox and then maybe other grandchildren that I have, and then it also makes me think about, you know, what am I passing on to other young people coming up that maybe are not blood related to me? Am I aware of those things? And so I think that's a role that teachers play. You know, why do you become a teacher? You want to help young people grow, and I think that's just a beautiful central part. I would say the most central part of our society. It's what makes human society really a good thing. You know,
all those relationships play different roles.
Yeah.
You know, right now in life where we are, for example, we have relationships with people who are older than us. We have relationships with people who are younger than us. And I think taking stock in that, really looking at my life and who I spend my time with, it's an important thing to do at any stage of life. To say, you know, how balanced am I in my interactions? Am I only ever hearing from things of people my own age? Am I only ever focused on people younger than me? Or do I have that balance of I spend time with elders, people who, you know, just have had more or different life experiences than me? All of those relational pieces impact who we are and how we see the world. Are very important.
Well, I would encourage you to dig into that article. It's we'll include the link. It's and the whole idea is the grandmother hypothesis.
Okay.
Grandmother hypothesis.
I really love it.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Love that
It's
whole
pretty
idea.
cool. I like it. I think it puts grandmas front and center on who we are as human beings. So, I think you were picking out the quote today.
I did, and I actually chose from a favorite, Brene Brown.
Oh yeah,
she's definitely a favorite
terrific.
of mine. But yeah, and we'll see how this connects in with what you've been sharing today.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, it said, connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Brene Brown.
Yeah, I think that's a great fit. And in this graphic, without judgment is a big one there. And I think that's a big thing for grandparents. You know, when I can know that I'm really connecting with my grandmother or my grandfather in a way that they're just loving me just exactly the way I am. You know.
Yes. I love the idea of it being energy. The connection is energy. And it is. It's the energy that we feel when we're with somebody, whether it's our grandma or whether it's a friend or a family member. There is an energy there. And when we can feel it in that way that is described here,
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Or like you said, when we carry it with us, even when they're not around.
Yes.
Carry a piece of that with us. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode, and we will see you next week.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.